And okay, so anyway, we'll get to all the proper things in a minute, but I thought that maybe we might just start because, hey, how are you? People have to go just to talk about the annual meeting, and I'll fill you in very briefly on the short conversations we have. And Aaron, maybe you jump in and just correct me whenever I get things wrong. But so the Public Humanities Network, thanks to CHCI, and I credit Aaron very much for the work he's done to help the organization to continue evolve and include the kind of work that you've all been doing. So there will be a conversation which is curated or organized by the Public Humanities Network during the main program of the actual event itself. Now, a couple of questions. I'm not sure how many of us are actually going to be there, which makes complicated the idea that whenever we've had these gatherings before in places, they've always been connected to places. So we've been doing a little bit in the background. We'd sent an email asking people to make any connections to their Latin American studies institutes or other kinds of centers or programs you might have on campus to see if they had any ideas. And we'd also thought about maybe reaching out to somewhere like the Museum of Human Rights and maybe organizing an event or conversation with them. But I know Robert had a thought about things, and also I just wanted to just say to you if you had any thoughts, or if you're going to go, would you? I mean, of all the people who were here, would you mind raising your hand if you're going to actually be there in Chile? Because it can be live and it can be okay. Oh, maybe I like that one. Yeah, I'd love to go, but I can't. Okay, well, so there should be good representation of people anyway. But have you any thoughts in general? Would you like us to reach out to the Museum of Human Rights? Would you like to organize a panel that can also be virtual? Robert, you had an idea as well.
Yes, my idea is quite embryonic, so please feel free to pile on and stretch it out to fruition. And I like the idea very much of the Museum of Human Rights being involved with this. So one of the things that we've been increasingly involved with our public engagement activities is finding ways to network with professionals who are non-humanists and not academics to bring sort of humanistic insights which inform their work, especially as it enables them to reflect on ethical and cultural issues and appreciate historical and cultural context. So one of the projects that we launched was the COVID-19 Oral History Project. We launched that in 2021. And essentially what we wanted to do is to preserve the experiences of those who had been directly involved in frontline pandemic response efforts in hospitals and in clinics, the ambulance drivers, the janitorial staff, et cetera, but whose stories typically are not told. So we work with a number of partners and individuals across the country, and we train students to become interviewers and collected these oral histories, which are now repurposing into podcasts and various other things, mainly to look into structural changes that were desperately needed in healthcare systems, but that the voices of, not necessarily the doctors, but more the nurses, the ambulance drivers, others who were really at the front lines, whose voices typically are not heard, to drive this. So I guess my idea for the meeting is to kind of showcase maybe 5 or 6 of these kinds of endeavors from across the spectrum, in each of us presenting, maybe about a 10-minute presentation with slides or video clips or what have you, and just to indicate sort of the range of the reach that we might be aspiring to in engaging the sort of non-academics and the professionals who are not necessarily humanists. So that's the idea in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you. Teresa? Did you have your hand up, or was it a hand up from saying you were going to go? Okay. Grand. Okay, good. Well, I mean, certainly, is that the kind of thing you all, please jump in, could imagine maybe if we had it somewhere? And Aaron, would it be okay to program somewhere? I'm actually not sure where in the city of Santiago the museum is in relation to the university. Are you familiar with that?
I would have to map it, but I will point out that we programmed the network meeting sort of at the end of the day. It's from 3 to 4 p.m. and there's quite a gap of time between that and the dinner. Yeah, so if you wanted to do the museum, there's plenty of time to get there. And maybe being at the end of the day, that's too our advantage, maybe the museum will have, you know, hours where they could just be open for us, something like that.
Yeah. Thank you. And Robert, just thinking to last year, whenever we were in Zurich again, thanks to Aaron, but we had a sort of you remember there were those projects that people, and maybe we could think about a call. So if we had this theme for a panel and if we could connect it to the museum, we could have a call for people to share on video as they did last year, just projects like it, excuse me. And they could maybe be posted either on the CHCI website or maybe in one of the places where the meeting was held as a kind of background music for the whole thing too. It could give it kind of context. More people would virtually be there. So if we had a panel like this, would you all like to have a call for it? I mean, does it sound like something you're interested in? Is it the kind of conversation you'd like to see? Any other thoughts? And greetings, Christina. Nice to see you. Jim?
Robert, could you just clarify when you were thinking of the panel and 10-minute things, were you suggesting that you'd have 10 minutes on the project you were talking about, or that other people would chime in with COVID-related projects? Or I didn't quite understand.
No, the COVID example is just an example of something that I would like to showcase in terms of what we were doing. But I would imagine that, you know, we could probably do 5 or 6 kinds of showcasings from that would encompass a sort of an array of perspectives, all of which would sort of be organized around trying to engage wider audiences and bring humanistic perspectives and insights into work that is conducted by non-academic audiences.
Yeah. And actually, the interesting thing about this might be that for the first time, really, since I've been going to these things, I mean, it will be the primary language of discussion will not be English necessarily, although there will also be parallel translation available. And so it might be a good way, if we had, when we talked before about using the actual theme of the conference, if we took that word, maybe as being the theme, like disruptions, perhaps, of, you know, in public humanities, new ways of doing things, we could have a call for people who might like to either be there and be part of the panel conversation and present, or maybe create some digital artifact that would represent it. Then we could gather that all together, program it, and we could talk with the museum about having it there if that was appropriate. But that sounds like a way to go forward. Yeah.
No, well, if we are going to go to the museum, I just took a quick look and it just looks pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I would think that we really want to have a good chunk of time, maybe to see if we could have a docent lead us through the museum, and then maybe have a place to settle after, and maybe have a few presentations of other people doing human rights work, or whatever people thought were appropriate. But I just wouldn't want us to give up the incredible opportunity of being at the museum.
No, totally. And you know, actually, so Kylie's not here, but Kylie messaged Jones, and she's also one of the people on the slate for new board members for the CHCI. So I recommend you all to vote there if you haven't already. I know that message went out today from Guillaume, but they've got an excellent slate of people. But Kylie has been doing that work with museums, and actually it was her began this conversation about the Museum of Human Rights. So we could certainly, and Kylie's intending to be there, she could chair the meeting, and we could also talk with her about building a human rights aspect into this program too, I think, because it's an international sites of conscience group that's become quite interested in public humanities work, and we can invite them to come along too. So we'll give it proper locality. Sorry, and Amy and John.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, in the interest of sort of the methodology that we use, maybe the museum has a public humanities project that we could invite as a collaborative partner on this.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. And would you be happy if that was kind of the core of things as well? We could build around that. Okay. John, is that what you were going to say?
Yeah, something similar. I wonder also if there's a presentation or a discussion, might not be a workshop, but not even about a specific project, but about maybe challenges or other successes or lessons anyone in the global South doing this work has faced. And so that might be being forced to translate to an English audience, and maybe the challenges they've had with that, with just the translation, not in translating, in just how it gets received on the other end, or rights, permissions, or I'm not sure necessarily how that stuff works in Chile, but I know we're not looking specifically just for people in Chile. We're looking broader Latin America, I think, right, Nicholas?
Yeah, and actually, one of the problems we had institutionally here was that we do parts of that work, but with our colleagues, we had a Latin American and Caribbean Studies Institute, and they're very focused on language programs, in particular in Brazil. That's just the way it is here. But I presume, am I right to say, in lots of other institutions, the Humanities Center and whatever form of Latin American studies aren't necessarily one and the same thing? So I don't know. I would love to be able to connect the call to both kinds of places. Have you any thoughts or ideas about that?
I just keep thinking one of the reasons we're in Santiago is to broaden that reach with our colleagues there. And so there seems to be something even like, I wonder what the Changing Humanities Center is in Latin America right now. I'm not sure what that conversation is.
Well, what about this, Aaron, maybe could you help us? So we've done it kind of informally. I did it here in UGA, Jim did it in Calgary. I know Kylie was doing it in Australia, just asking colleagues in the field who are not in the Humanities Centre about this program. But if we drew up this call, and maybe I'll share a draft of it with you all before, is it something, could the CHCI reach out both to the membership targeted continentally in the way that you can divide the membership geographically, but are there also other transnational organizations that the CHCI could reach out to? I'm not sure what the version of the ACLS or the MLA would be in these Spanish-speaking contexts, but are there other bodies CHCI could reach out to share the call and make the invitation for a presentation?
Yeah, we made inroads with mainly LASA and CLACSO, and
Okay.
CLACSO is really the one network that stretches across South America and Central America. And so they're happy to reshare things from us. And then a lot of our membership is involved with LASA. And so they've been helping us too. Yeah.
Okay. John, did you want to say more? So, well, one other thing, I suppose, in that sense. So just to summarize, if we did a call and Robert, I mean, the National Humanities Centre would be great in a sense, representing one form of the North, at least in North America, so we could think about how to involve you in that sense. If we had a call that was, and we'll talk with the museum, but something which was experiential and led at the museum that curated into a conversation which was about, as you say, humanities centres, public humanities practices in South America potentially, but I think it should also be open to the membership. I'll think about how to express that. Maybe we'll put a call that would allow different people to make applications, which would be both in person or virtual. We could think about sharing those and then having the call both in Spanish and in English so that it has its most, but maybe someone would help me with that. Is that thinking along the right lines?
And this is making me realize that after we tried the experiment last year of gathering the videos, I didn't think to go back and ask if you had any sense of how they got, whether people looked at them, whether they drew interest. So just before we ask, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
I wonder, Aaron, do you have any sense of how they were accessed or?
Yeah, it was very popular. In short, all the submissions are still up on the previous. I can find it for you. And they've had a long shelf life. Like people looked at them before the conference, during the conference, and after the conference. I think we had the most visitors after the conference. So it did draw a lot of attention. There is one other place we are thinking of asking for flash presentations, perhaps during best practices for humanities centers. Oh no, sorry, not that one. I get them all mixed up now. I think it is that actually, best practices for humanities centers at the top of Thursday, June 22nd. So in case that's not a route you guys want to go down, flash presentations, know that that's another spot that might be happening in the conference.
I mean, maybe the flash presentations would be the place for almost like a miniature gallery. You could do a brief account of a project you were doing, although I wouldn't like to be disrespectful to the projects by making them so brief, but maybe that's something we could think about. And I'm only saying thank God in the notes because I thought you were going to say like 6 people had watched them. That was I was waiting for my moment of humiliation there.
No, I'm so happy to hear that. And it also means that we've got some models to show people. I think it's always a lot easier to get people to contribute things if they can see. So we can use some of the ones from last year that people found especially compelling as formal in terms of form to share for this call.
The one thing I would encourage you all to do as a group is identify bigger projects you'd like to highlight amongst yourselves. And I could even work to, if you identify a certain list of, oh, you definitely want to highlight this, this, and this, just as kind of anchor spotlights, because I say this because most of the submissions were from individuals, a lot of grad students, a lot of early career faculty, and there was missing things like Josh Calhoun's Holding History, like bigger things that have been around for a while that you might want to highlight as a group.
Yeah, I do. I like John's point as well about how things are different, or may not be. I just don't know. But you know, that moment that we've never managed in the network of being global in our conversation as much as in our inflection in that sense. I'd love to know. Okay. Any other thoughts? But a mixture of a curated visit to the museum, if they're willing to do so, with some kind of conversation at the museum that would come from more places than North America or Europe, and that would be in more languages than English. And then we will also think about a digital component to that that could, I mean, maybe let's talk about this very briefly. I know some of you have to go. Maybe we could highlight 3 big projects that we have a longer digital story about. But then maybe we could invite short presentations about how we understand best practice in the humanities, and that could be all kinds of people doing that. But like sorry, Aaron, is that okay?
Sorry, really quick, if you all want to do something with the museum, I just encourage us to start that process early, particularly because of access for virtual attendees. Because we don't know what their virtual setup is over there.
Sure. And maybe the simpler thing, I mean, we could write them, Aaron, I'll do it immediately after this, but with you, is that we could also invite them to come to the conference site and talk about their work to be part of the conversation. And maybe there's time for an optional visit after. Yeah, and if we were to pick 3 projects, so I mean, Robert, you talked about your big COVID project. That might be an interesting thing about oral history, because that's a different kind of public humanities. Maybe there's Josh's project about history. Are there any other ones? Are there any other great things that any of you are doing that would be really super to share in this context of disruptions and commotion?
I'd have to talk to people if they're willing to share this. Part of the Minnesota Transform project that's housed under the IAS, the University of Minnesota, is the Truth Project, which is basically looking at the settler colonial roots of the university and basically indigenous genocide and dispossession, and how the university's endowment and also the regents have basically enriched themselves. And you know, so everything's basically as a result of indigenous, you know, dispossession. And so this is an amazing project being run by our Native students, Native grad students and students outside of the university, who are putting together a massive report and basically trying to hold the university accountable. And how, you know, the university acknowledges that this is happening, but they haven't yet held themselves accountable. So for example, they are not funding this project. We are funding part of it, and Minnesota Transform, funded through the Mellon Foundation, is funding the bulk of it. And so, but I have to check with them to see if they're willing to talk about the work that they're doing. It's really amazing work that they're doing.
You know, it sounds like it. And if you would like to check, because I know there can be all kinds of vulnerabilities attached to that kind of work, but absolutely. And I mean, maybe, I'm not sure what capacity there is, but even in a different kind of way of involving. Aaron, is there provision this time for grad students, for example, for CHCI? There are travel funds out there for people to be able to go. Am I right to remember that? Yeah,
so on the registration page, it lists the different kinds of supports we're offering this year. I'm proud to announce it's more than ever. We have an in-person scholarship that's a limited number, but then we also have basically free virtual scholarship for any early career scholar, and that's broadly written, any grad student, any postdoc that you can think of, or anyone from Latin America or its diaspora. So basically anyone who wants to attend for a virtual, could come for free if they wish.
Aaron, one more, and thank you. It sounds like a great project. I can only imagine how it would go here. But Aaron, you were saying about, do you have a timeline? I mean, it's one thing us saying we'd like to have a call and set up that mechanism to get people, but we need to do it quickly, wouldn't we? Like, I mean, when would you like to know the names of people for?
Sorry, name
the detail of the detail of the panel. When would you like to have that for?
For your particular session?
Yeah.
We're in our minds, we're splitting up things that people are. I won't go down that road. Basically, whenever you want, because last year it was quite there. It was pretty late that we knew the final details, but I think the fact that just this session is scheduled in, that's all that most people need to know to attend the conference.
Okay.
The finer details of your session, I don't think need to be locked into place till whenever you're ready.
Okay. So if you're all happy with this, then maybe what I'll do is actually I'll talk with Aaron and we'll reach out to the museum and see how they are and what they're interested in doing. And then whenever we know that, we will create a little draft call, and I'd be happy to send that to the network by email if you would like. You can all get back to me, say what you think about it. And then that call would be for whether you want to do something in person, or whether you'd like to present something virtually, or whether you just like to attend. And then we can send that call out, and we could probably have a very quick turnaround on that, I would think. I mean, all this could be done within the next month, I would imagine. Now, are you happy to have a panel conversation? Is that what you would like?
Works for me.
Yeah, okay.
Versus what?
Well, I don't know. First, I shouldn't maybe have asked the question. I'm only inviting But yeah, so something panel and something conversational with digital and other kinds of aspects to it. And maybe in talking to the museum as well, they might have some performative part of it that we could also build in the program, and I'll certainly ask them about that. Okay.
I mean, I think as this evolves, it could move to a more hybrid model if the participants, if it works out that way in terms of who's participating. But see what you get, and then we could shape it.
Okay. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah. All right. And if there are great projects that you're thinking about, you need to go and check with people. And if you do think it's a good idea, come back and ask me, and we'll talk about how we can make sure people are safe while celebrating the work that we're doing. And if we can, we will certainly do that. But thank you for sharing that project about your institution. And Patricia, welcome, and Jessica, welcome, and Jimmy, welcome too.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Then the only other sort of short things were the information on the workshop. It was in the last email. It's going to be at the end of April 27th, and led by Dr. Leslie Ann Noel, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Design Studies at NC State. And really what we were trying to do there was to use the practice and language of another discipline, which is humanities related, but not necessarily one that's at the core of the work that we do, and to think about inclusivity and diversity in the context of design and designing projects and designing information. So you can sign up for that. There are a limited amount of spaces, but I think there's still places left. And equally, if it's not for you, would you mind sharing that with grad students or assistant directors or staff members or colleagues, anyone who you think might be interested in it? I'm perfectly happy for anyone to attend it who they think it would be useful. And also just to share, Aaron, do you want to talk a little bit briefly before you go about the work you've been doing with the National Humanities Alliance?
Oh, sure. We've been doing this mini series on advocacy, and the next one is about advocating to undergrads, and it's at the end of the month. The details are in the last newsletter, also on our website. I'll find the post here. But it's a nice spread of different kinds of institutions, which I was glad to see. This is a very much a US-based series, so don't worry about the lack of global representation there. And so there's representation from very community colleges all the way up to R1s, which was great. And then we're putting together a final one about advocating to hire administrators, which I know everyone's quite eager to talk about. So beyond this mini series itself, I think we're going to try to do a mini series like this each year. So if there are certain topics, like big topics like advocacy that are on your minds, let's talk about it early and then we can plan for next spring. Yeah, whether that's with NHA or with another partnership.
Sure.
I don't know if everybody's seen the NHA report that went out like maybe 2 weeks ago. Michelle May Curry of NHA wrote a report called Building Projects in the Public Humanities, and it was a really terrific, sort of pithy report. And it was useful on our campus because they focused on a couple of our projects in their list, and I was able to send it to our new president. And, but I encourage all of you to take a look at it if you haven't, because it's a really nice sort of short compendium of some really great projects and how to kind of put them together effectively.
Yeah, no, congratulations. Michelle's doing super work. She's been terrific.
Yeah, and we've been partnering with NHA on a big project this year too. And, they've just been great partners and they're just so supportive of this work. So, whatever way I think we can continue to bring them in to our network events or just to make them partners, I think would be very useful. And my sense from talking to Steve Knapp the other day was that they're really looking for that kind of work. They're not quite sure where their future is going to be because some of the grants are ending.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think there's going to be, I was talking to Robert Townsend in the Academy, and I think that there's going to be a project with the Public Humanities and the NHA, maybe at the the annual meeting that happens each year between the State Humanities Councils and the NHA, which I think is in Indianapolis or somewhere later in the year. But it's very much about data. They've been in the state of Georgia. They have been recording the income of humanities and arts graduates, as they have with all graduates, but they're only counting the income of people who stayed in state afterwards, which is actually only a minority of the students. So anyway, that question of humanities data is also going to be important with the NHA going forward. Sorry, Josh, did you raise your hand?
I was just going to add, piling on to what Jessica said, I've just been working with Michelle they reached out and asked us to write a blog for their Humanities for All Alliance. And just part of the experience was seeing just how many programs were highlighted there. And it was an amazing experience for my co-director and I to kind of think about how to talk about our project to that broad of an audience. So I know that's content they're often looking for. And they were also terrific, both Michelle and Younger, who was our contact there, were terrific editors as well. So it was a pleasure to work with them.
Yeah.
And I was just going to add that a number of us have been going to the annual conference that NHA co-plans with State Humanities Councils. And the next one is going to be in Indianapolis at the end of October. I don't know that I can't tell you the exact dates. But I was just writing to Aaron about this today, that I wonder if there might be a group of us who would want to propose a roundtable of public projects at humanity centers, but even maybe more interestingly, centers that are working with their State Humanities Council in any capacity, since that's what the intersection at the conference. But I'll grab the CFP and put it in the chat, because since a lot of us go anyway, it would be really wonderful to do some kind of program together.
And Josh, just listening to you there, and John, sorry, but it does make me think, if this isn't too stagey, if we had the right kind of question to ask for our panel conversation, it'd be very interesting to hear about how different people answered it, as opposed to them sharing projects. Just thinking about it that way. Indianapolis at the end of October is not the most encouraging sentence I have ever heard. John, did you want to say something?
I was just going to ask, did we have a sense already of how many humanities centers or institutes existed in Latin America, maybe not just Chile, that were a part of our network? I think that number was really small, like super small, right?
Yeah, 3. That's there's our least represented region. Yeah.
So I suppose that really speaks to including Latin American institutes and centers here to try and see what connections are there, because there are many, but maybe they just haven't been in the orbit of humanities centers and institutes per se, John, I wonder.
I'll also add, I've kind of been researching this question all year on why, and the main answer I receive is because we don't do enough content in Spanish. That's really the reason. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely think about that when we're thinking about a moderator for the panel and all the rest of that. So maybe you'll have a think. Okay, well, I don't want to detain you all for too much longer. I do want to introduce you. I don't want to embarrass him, but my colleague Ben Ehlers is a wonderful scholar of early modern colonial Spain and is going to be going to Chile. So Ben will be there. I will not, but just hi, Ben. And
hello, everyone.
Here are your people.
Yes.
Remember these faces.
Good to see you all virtually. I speak to you not a half a mile from where Nicholas is sitting in his office. I'm in the history department at the University of Georgia, and looking forward to the gathering.
Thanks, Ben. I have less asbestos in my office, so I'm glad to see. So, all right, well, will I leave it then? Thank you all for your time and thoughts. I'll draw up a little summary email. I'll talk to Aaron. We'll talk to the event at the venue in the museum. And then whenever we have those sorts of basic details, I'll send an email to the steering committee just to get it straight language. But then I'll send it to everyone in the network and you can have a look. Do you like the call? If there's any change you want to make, we'll do so. We'll give the call a 2 or 3 week turnaround. People can decide whether they'd like to do something virtual in person, and then we'll take it from there. It should all be, what's this now, February? By the end of March, we should have it all in shape. And we'll try and keep it multilingual and in conversation between different experiences around this general theme of commotion. Sound good? Okay. Thank you all. It's lovely to see you from north to south and east to west. Thank you for taking the time. And I'm sorry I was in Chile, but I'll see you soon. All right. Take care. Thank you all.
Good to see everybody.
Bye.